You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Catholic Mama podcast. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Thanks for joining me today on this episode where I am joined by Brendan Lyons, who is a Catholic, lifelong Catholic, a father and husband, an author, musician, all-around creative kind of guy. And I'm excited to get to talk to Brendan today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, which the listeners don't know, but you and I know a couple months ago, I guess it's like 6 months ago, you and I had a wonderful conversation that never got recorded because my computer or me, I don't know, it was probably human error. But here we are again.
Blame it on the computer. What's it going to say?
That's right. That's right. Those technology are harum. But here we are, 2.0 of the Brendan and Christine conversation. And we're actually going to talk about something slightly different than the first time. And the listeners will never know. We're going to keep that a secret now.
Sure. Oh, well,
but we've had.
I guess we were, but.
But you've had quite an eventful couple of months. You put out your latest book. Your wife's about to have your first baby. You bought a house.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I like to consolidate my stress as much as possible. So just get it all at once, and then everything else is easy, right?
Sure. Yeah. Especially, once you have the kid, having the kid is the hardest part. After that, when they're babies, that's easy.
I'm not even, all I'm doing is picking up food and bringing drinks around.
So, I had a very short introduction of who you are. Can you please, for the listeners, tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I am an author. I have written a couple books. I got a couple that are on Amazon at the moment. I am you said musician. I'm honored that you would say that, but
you're musically inclined, are you?
Yes, I play a couple instruments, but none of them amazingly. And I am a father. By the time this airs, I will have a born child. Currently, I have a 37-week old child, however you would say it. So my wife is due in mid-April. So by the time everybody hears this, I'll be knee-deep in diapers. So, and husband, as you mentioned, and a lifelong Catholic. And I really tried to put my Catholic faith into what I write. Do we talk about like a couple of what I have out there right now, or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure, great. So I'll start with the earliest. So the first thing I put out was this series called The Book of Iden. The first book was The Traveler, and that was actually kind of an exploration for me in going from maybe an a-religious storyline into something that really incorporated my faith. So it was something a little bit more subtle, I guess, but I like to think that you can see it everywhere. So there's 3 books in that series. There's a 4th one that eventually is going to happen, but as you know, with I don't know, that was always my big project, so I'm almost afraid to finish it. And then I have a book called Single Candles, which I'm very proud of. That's not just, although I guess not specifically Catholic, it's very Christian, but it's also very pro-life. It's kind of aimed towards the pro-life issues, and it's a collection. It's sort of a collection of short stories. It really is all one story, but it's from 4 different storyline perspectives, and they set one another off. And what they do is they kind of, at the core of it is how people share their pro-life views and their faith as well, and how living those values really helps to spread to other people. Like, for instance, the first story is about a politician. He's up there and he's kind of in a fight with his party about being pro-life, which is actually, it's actually come up to be a big issue again, as Dan Lipinski just got voted out, which was very sad. I was very upset to hear that, but kind of makes this story a little bit more topical, as the main character is a pro-life Democrat. I'm from Pennsylvania, so that's not quite as crazy. We had Governor Casey, but he's kind of being pushed out. So he's trying to fight, and his fight inspires a younger person to try to fight in her own school. And it kind of sets off the other stories. So it's really about how when you stand up, you show that you care about this. You get other people who care about this to speak up. So I'm very, very proud of that. And the proceeds from that all go to the people who inspired it, which was Birthright. It's a crisis pregnancy center. I had just gone to a young adult Catholic group, and the person who ran the local Birthright came and spoke and told us about what they were doing. And I was just so inspired. So it kind of inspired me to start writing about how people inspire each other. And so, kind of in thanks for that, everything from that book goes to them. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, and then let's see.
Well, with writing, well, how long have you? When was that? That was your first? No, because you had the music as well. When did you start on this kind of creative path? Not pushing, but like bringing forward the Catholic or Christian or pro-life, say, values. When did you start all of this?
I would say, well, I mean, I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I used to have this. I don't know how old it was. The computer was as old as I was, so it was a very old word processor, and I started writing on that. But I would say the faith really came in probably when. It's hard to say exactly when I sort of had a reinvigoration of faith in my life, but I would say it was about my mid-20s. I had started helping out with a youth group just because my siblings both did stuff for the church, and I was starting to, I had been an aspiring writer already, and I had an education degree, and I thought, okay, this is how I can help. But it really, that experience turned me in from somebody who went to church into a real Catholic, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And it was just getting the chance to inspire the young people, or really, I mean, early on, I was just helping the actual youth minister really inspire, but I was there and I was excited to do. And it just, that kind of got me thinking, if I'm going to be writing, why aren't I doing this with my writing? So I really started to bring that in. So yeah, I guess maybe my mid-20s is when I started, which was, for reference, several years ago.
It's funny. I have always been a writer as well, and I love sci-fi and fantasy novels. And so I always wanted to write one. And I have spent so long on this one particular story. You mentioned before, that's your big project. You didn't want to finish it. And I have written it in different ways, over the years. I love this story and I don't want to get rid of it. Well, the problem was it's always like, and now looking back on it, or when I would finish writing whatever version of it, I would go back and it would still feel hollow. Like, man, I'm missing something. How do I, whatever. And I realized that I was trying so hard to sidestep any kind of religious or spiritual belief system in the characters. And it made everything fall short because of that. And now I'm thinking, well, now I'm Catholic. I could go back and, really infuse all of this stuff with Catholicism and make it really special. And hopefully, what's in my head doesn't always come out on paper. Right. It doesn't always, it's not as magical as you think it's going to be. But now I'm paralyzed because, Tolkien is a Catholic fantasy writer. Wow, he's amazing. Or, C.S. Lewis is an amazing Christian, almost Catholic writer. How amazing fantasy storylines that he would come up with. And now I'm just paralyzed out of fear of mediocrity.
Well,
so I'm very impressed that you have done this.
That's something you kind of have to get past comparing yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's especially difficult when people will be like, oh, what's it like? And you're like, you're trying to describe something, and like especially with my first series that I was working on is, it's very high fantasy. There's some magic, but it's mainly just like, it's fantastical, and people are like, oh, like Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, well, let's not.
No, don't go there.
Don't put that on me. I had somebody, and I believe they're being specific about something, but someone just recently, like my last project, they were like, oh, your writing was reminding me of C.S. Lewis, and I was like, you could say that. I'm not sure I agree with that. But I was like, they were like, no, I mean, like the way you were saying this, and I was like, okay, all right. We're being specific, like this specific thing.
Not everything.
Okay, all right. I won't even let somebody else say something like, "Oh, it's like this guy or that guy." Like, no, it's just me, and that's not like
it is so difficult though, the comparison, especially. I mean, I don't know how many Catholic fantasy and writers have made it into as a household name. So it's slim pickings to if you are going to compare, and of course if comparisons are happening to great authors. But anyway, so that's great. I'm so happy that you've done this. And so the next project. So why don't we talk a little bit about since we're on the fantasy topic a little bit, talk more about that project that you've just finished up part of it, right? And it's out on Amazon.
Yeah. So this was I decided to just really just I don't know how to describe, just kind of go nuts, maybe. Way of saying it. It's just I wrote the story called High King, and it was it's ongoing, at least hopefully, and I just decided to throw the complete Catholic thing into it. There's really no subtlety in the Catholic part in that. So it's post-apocalyptic, which I promise had nothing to do with. I started writing it long before I'd ever heard of the virus.
I will attest to that because you mentioned this 6 months ago to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it just kind of happened. In fact, I felt bad. Like I was releasing it, and like I was like, oh, I'll tag like post-apocalyptic, and I was like, I don't want people to think I'm like, hey, the world's gonna end. Grab this world ending. No, but it is it's post-apocalyptic. It takes place in Ireland, and it centers around this guy who shows up, and he announces that he's going to restore the High Kingship, and he's here to take the castle that follows has his name. So he comes in, and he decides he's going to bring Catholicism back. Now, this was inspired a little bit by some of the stuff that's happened in Ireland recently, and I'm certainly not saying that Catholicism has left Ireland, but I know that there's been a big struggle for the church there.
Sure. I mean, how could it not if they've voted to legalize abortion in recent memory?
Yeah, and it's so I was partially inspired by that, and I just I mean, I'm Irish American. I don't try to weigh into other countries' politics too much, but I feel that sense of Irishness in my heart.
Sure.
So I wanted to write this story about, basically mirroring a little bit of Catholicism coming back to Ireland. So there's a lot of reference to Irish Catholicism and Irish culture because I've tried to immerse myself in that. I just, I love it so much. So the main character shows up in a leather-bound boat, which, if people are familiar with St. Brendan, who I believe, named after. My mom says that, but then I'm not sure if she found out about him later and just like the name. We'll see. But he sailed across the Atlantic in a leather-bound boat. So
that's interesting. Keeps the water out, I suppose.
In legend, which I choose to believe as true. So that's kind of how this main character is introduced to Ireland as this man who comes, speaking Catholicism and sailing over in a leather-bound boat to Ireland. So, and it's been really fun for me. It's going to be a little weird probably for some people to read because the main character and I share a name, but there's a reason for it, I promise. It's not me. But there's a reason why I did that, and you can kind of find out. But it's a thing, so I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay, all right. So wait, what's and you said it's on Amazon. Can you say the title again? And I'll put the link in the show notes as well. So if anybody would like to check this out, it sounds like a fun read.
Oh, sure, yeah. So it's called High King. So
okay,
yeah. There's a map of Ireland on the cover, so that should be
very cool. And then how many more of these are you anticipating?
So I don't know. You know, what I did was when I first started writing it, I was like, this would be a fun graphic novel, but I can't draw. So I just decided to start writing it as if it was like episodes. And I wrote the first book as if it was a season. And I think it has a nice, satisfying conclusion to the season, but there certainly can be more.
Okay.
So if you're interested in something that you're not sure how long it's going to go on, check it out. But it really is. Well, you know, the reason I haven't quite decided how long it's going to go on is because I guess who knows how long kind of this, like, the world is going to go on. Now that sounds ridiculously pompous or whatever it is. I don't know. I sound a little weird, but I just mean, you know, there's a lot that goes into bringing the faith around, and that's not really a mission that ends. So it will end. I'm not going to die before it's over, I promise. But I don't have exactly how long it is planned.
Sure. So besides the story's clearly Catholic in that he's spreading Catholicism. When you said, is that really when you said you go all in with Catholicism? Is there, are you using just Catholic, besides like clearly Catholic things? Have you infused Catholicism even in just kind of the symbolism that's in the story, or kind of overarching themes?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, so there's definitely some symbolic moments. There's also definitely a lot of sort of references to things that have happened in Catholic history. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of kind of invoking of martyrdom, because, you know, anytime you come into an area that doesn't like what you have to say, it can end poorly, and, you know, we know how that kind of went. But there's also a lot of value in the way, a lot of Catholic values in the way that the main character and other characters that the influences tries to go about putting together this this realm, this kingdom. And it has a lot to do with it's not like a direct monarchical thing, but there's a lot of, like, I hesitate to say that the economics are meant to evoke like distributism, because I'm not an economic scholar on distributism, but I have, you know, I've read some Chesterton and some of the stuff on that, and I really wanted to pull that sort of idea in. But there's also, you know, we pull in the idea of what you sacrifice for one another, and also just kind of there's a big thread of who you put your faith in, and there's a kind of a pull between putting your faith in like a leader and putting your faith in God. And, you know, obviously if you're starting a kingdom, or if you have like a Catholic, you know, if you're a leader of people follow you, but they have to follow God. So how do you balance the amount of, like, the kind of leadership, the amount of leadership, and how much trust you place in somebody who's going to lead you versus the amount of trust you place in God? And you hope that it's all in God and that person is completely leading you the right way, but we know humans are humans. So
that they are. I love that. You know, I don't know that there are many Catholic fantasy or sci-fi novels out there. And a while back, I was listening to an interview, might have been on EWTN. I can't quite remember, but it was a woman who writes Catholic romance novels. I thought, that's interesting. And the interviewer or the author, I can't remember which now, was saying that, you know, it's important to write these stories because if somebody who's Catholic and a good Catholic really upholds the Catholic faith and adheres to her teachings, if you don't write stories, say you're now I'm probably shooting myself in the foot because it's telling me that I should probably write something. If you don't write, if you have a story to tell and you love to write, you need to write it. There, now I'm shooting myself in the foot, definitely. Because if you don't write it, somebody who's not a good Catholic is going to write a book like that. Not like that exactly, but, you know, I've never heard of a Catholic romance novel before. Clearly, I've heard of romance novels. So really, like, smutty romance novels are being published all the time that have no Catholic slant to them. Mm-hmm. There are historical fictions and post-apocalyptic dystopian stuff. I mean, all this stuff is being published all the time, and very little of it has a really good understanding and foundation in the Christian or Catholic faith. So if somebody has a story like that to write, we should write it and put it out there, whether it's self-published or if you want to wait around and try to get like big time published, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's really important to have these stories out there just to show that, you know, that Catholics have something that they can read, that they can be proud that they read, not feeling like they need to go to the confessional afterwards.
Well, yeah. And that's, if you are unhappy with the state of literature, then, you know, it might be that, you know, we're the ones who need to do something about it. Like anyone who reads a book and, well, I mean, for example, you know, I've read Game of Thrones. It's a very well written book. Like, he's clearly got talent. But you do kind of feel like you have to wash your hands afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, that does. Yes.
And that's, you know, that's how he writes. That's his thing. It's not how I write, and I decided to, you know, to write how I write. And I think that people are out there, you know, they have an idea for a story and they feel like they, you know, their style and their values need to be represented in a way that they're not right now. Well, you get out there and write it, and talk to people as well about writing it, because, you know, just sitting in a room alone, even though that's kind of what people think of when you think of a writer, not necessarily going to help you better communicate that those values through writing, because then you're just kind of talking to yourself.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, I picked up Game of Thrones, I think when I was on maternity leave with my second child, and I got there, I think I got halfway through the third book and I had to stop because I was nursing this sweet little baby, and it was just so awful. I'd finished reading, like, oh, I probably just like injected a lot of stress hormone into the breast milk as I was nursing my child reading this. I can't. I can't do it.
And this isn't a, like, people read what they read, you know, and they like what they like. I think one of the harder things about that series is that it's also not necessarily treated as like bad behavior,
right?
Which, and
people, you know, doing what people do,
and that might be true. That might, you know, that people act like that, but I think as Catholics we have a certain, especially Catholic writers, and we have a certain responsibility to not just write how people are, but to write how people should try to be. It's okay to acknowledge failings, and we should acknowledge that we're failures, because we have to acknowledge that we're all sinners, but we should also acknowledge that we're all called to be better than that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, there is objective good and objective evil. There's objective morality. And yeah, it's interesting because in a storyline like that of Game of Thrones, there's no passing judgment on what's going on. It's just being reported and dealt with, rather than I mean, we can innately like read that those stories and feel that, yes, this is a good guy, this is a bad guy, but the author is just almost like it's reporting on it, rather than, although I was going to say like a journalist, but journalists put their own slant on things all the time. You know, just, very, very kind of like passively reporting what's happening, rather than trying to lead somebody to a higher standard and better outcomes.
Oh yeah, and that's kind of difficult dances to lead somebody to that without shoving them into it.
Yeah. Yes,
So.
that is true. You can't be preachy. We mentioned maybe J.R.R. Martin is not a favorite. Maybe he is. I don't know. What
I respect his writing talent, and I think he tells a story very well. And I wouldn't write like he does.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that about Stephen King sometimes.
Yeah.
So what writers do you like?
So I grew up with this guy who, he's one of those people, like, if you heard of him, people who loved him. Is Brian Jakes, and he wrote the Redwall novels.
Oh, yeah. I love Redwall.
And I think that you can see, rereading my own books, like I've read like passage, like certain phrases I've used, like definitely leaked in from the Redwall series. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm cool with that though. But so he was a favorite. Of course, I love Tolkien. I actually read the Silmarillion. I can say I could not tell you 100% of what happened in it, but I'm proud to say I did it.
That's good. I quit. I was probably about 10 pages in. It was a long time ago. I tried and I quit. That's why, my favorite present I ever got, I was probably about 12 years old. It was a joint present from my mom and my grandmother. And it was a suitcase filled with books. And I think all the books in there were the Redwall series books.
Mm-hmm.
And that was heaven on earth for me. But I tried reading. I only have Redwall. That's the only book that I have. The rest of them must still be at my mom's house. Huh. And I went to read to my kids. I thought this would be a great chapter book to just read aloud to them. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, Clooney scared the bejesus out of them.
Oh, yeah.
We might have to wait a couple more years. They could not get over him. But I was like, but look at all these other characters. This is fun, right? Like, what? He has an eye patch, it's just...
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to wait a little while.
Yeah,
I love those books so much.
I think I read my first one in 5th grade, and my
kids are definitely younger than that.
Yeah, well, I probably could have started. I probably could have started a little bit younger. I read one of the prequels, the Martin the Warrior.
Oh yeah,
I was in 5th grade. It was one of the most amazing books I ever read, and I was a slow reader, so. I was a slow reader, and I would quit on things because it took me forever to read them. And I never quit on Martin the Warrior.
Oh,
and thank goodness I did.
That's a good testimony. That's good because there aren't as much. I know it can be difficult to find books that are good for middle grade reader, especially boys, that are kind of more wholesome. And the Redwall series and the prequel, I think those are really good ones to recommend to anybody else.
I totally agree, and I'm gonna be honest. I have reread them since, and
I was actually really upset. My kids were kind of upset over Clooney. I was like, I'm just gonna read this by myself. I'm gonna go back and read it. I really those books are really good.
Yeah, it's a great reread too for an adult. It's one of those.
Yeah,
they're one of those ones. They're not as famous as a lot of your other like young adult book series that adults can still read. But I'd say that you can. Yeah. You can reread them.
Bunch of mice living in an abbey. It's great.
Oh, yeah. I actually met him. Oh my gosh! So I got to talk about this because it's how I would want to be if I was a more successful writer. So if I was famous, I was a famous writer, and I'll do it that way. This is how I want to be. I went to this book signing for Brian Jakes. He had just I believe The Long Patrol had just come out. And so I was going to get the thing signed, but I was a little apprehensive about actually, buying a new book because, books are, my gosh, they're all hardback. They're all like $30, and I was a weirdly conscientious child. So, so I took my favorite bookmark, and I was going to bring that up. So I went up, and the lady from the bookstore was like, "You have to buy something." And I was like, "But I only have this thing." And like, she was like, "No, you have to buy a book for him to sign." So like, go. And I was like, I broke out into tears. I was bawling. I was 21 years old. No, I'm just kidding. I think I was think I was 12. And I was just crying. And Brian Jakes is like, hey, no, wait, stop. Come here. Come back. So he came back. He was like, what's your name? And I was like, Brendan. And I was like, you're my favorite. He was like, well, thank you. He was like, you want me to sign the bookmark? I'll sign the bookmark. So he signed me the bookmark, and he said, thank you for being a reader. And he sent me along my way. And it was just, I want to be that guy. Like, he cared that I was upset, because I guess because I was a reader or because he was a good person. It didn't matter. Either of those two was a great reason to care about somebody. So,
that's
my mom
really
actually
awesome. So he's a good guy too.
Yeah, well, I
want to support those.
He sadly passed away. Was it 2 years ago? But
oh, really?
Yeah, it was very, very upsetting. But he was a good guy. He wrote a lot of good books, and
a wonderful legacy for him to leave.
Yeah.
So, okay, as we wrap up, I know I kind of cut you off there. You said you like, did you have another author? I think I jumped in. Hanging.
Oh, I mean,
or leave a thought unfinished.
No. It's a couple other, like, I really liked Kurt Vonnegut. Again, it's another person I wouldn't really write like, but nor do I think I could. Same with Shakespeare. I was one of those weird kids who loved Shakespeare.
Oh no. I so wanted to understand without having to read all these side notes.
The secret I found, and it's probably why I wasn't like a literature master's or something like that, was to just be okay with not getting it all. I was like, as soon as I was like, you know what? I'm only getting 30% of it, but I'm really liking the 30% I'm getting. So I was just like, that's what I'm going to get. That's pretty how good. I guess you could, I don't know if you could call that falling in love with Shakespeare, but that's how I developed a relationship with Shakespeare.
It's interesting.
I wasn't going to get him, and that was okay.
Yeah. Well, I think most of my interactions with Shakespeare would have been in a high school classroom where everybody had to take turns reading, and everybody was too embarrassed to actually try. So the only Shakespeare I heard, besides I think having to read, I don't know, Midsummer Night's Dream maybe, or I can't even think of it. Maybe, I don't think it was Hamlet. Anyway. Well, no, it was The Tempest.
Okay.
It was just high school kids who couldn't understand it, trying to read and just be done, so they didn't have to read aloud anymore. And it was so much better when we finally got to watch. I think we watched the 1970 whatever version of Romeo and Juliet, and like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's poor. It was lost in translation, I guess, or lost in application, but. What are you going to do? Public school.
I was one of the people who enjoyed that, and it was partially because nobody could do it right anyway. So like, I didn't have to be embarrassed about sounding ridiculous because everybody did.
Yeah.
Now I have some friends from this Catholic young adult group I've been a part of, who we get together like once a year, and we all have parts, and we read a Shakespeare play.
That's fun.
Together, and we kind of half act out, because nobody can remember. I mean, we don't even know what we're saying, a lot of us. So like, so we can't really act it out that well. But it's done with a lot of enthusiasm, and that's what's important.
That's just a good wholesome fun. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Before I forget, because the listeners don't realize this, but where I used to live for 10 years prior to moving to Wisconsin is like basically down the street from where you're from. Mm-hmm. Are you part of the kayak group?
Yes, that's them.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
It's a bunch of my friends from kayak.
The leader of it, Levi, is one of our is actually the godfather of our
Levi? You're kidding me.
Yeah.
He just texted me on my birthday.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I love Levi.
Yeah, he's the godfather of our fourth child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's come out twice now to stay at our house since we moved to Wisconsin. I felt bad. It's difficult to find good friends as an adult. I remember seeing a meme a while ago that nobody talks about the miracle of Jesus having 12 close friends in his 30s.
Yeah, exactly.
It's impossible. So we finally get this great group of friends through kayak, which is a young adults group for people who are listening and don't know. And then we move. And my husband and Levi, the leader of the group currently, are best friends. They have weekly phone calls that they do, and I'm like, oh, sorry, we got to move now. But Levi's been nice enough to come out and was here for the baptism for Marin, and he's awesome. That's such a fun thing to do. I like that.
Yeah, it's great. That's great.
Well,
I like him a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think Catholics are pretty nice people, especially ones that are really Catholic.
Well, yeah, the ones who are going to go to a Catholic young adult group, people in their
they care.
20s and 30s.
Care. That's right. They
usually
want
nice
their
folks.
Orthodox. They want to spread of the faith and are really excited about it. So, Brendan, thank you so much for joining me on this. I will put the link in the show notes for where to find High King. But please, before we go, why don't you tell people where they can find more of your stuff?
Oh, so everything I've written is on Amazon. So you can just search my name on Amazon, and it should come up. If it's about the old Prime Minister of Australia, that is not me.
No kidding.
I have been trying to get them to take it. So on like Goodreads, they do like, this person wrote all these books, and I have had this book about the former Prime Minister of Australia on here for just years now, and I can't convince them that I'm sure it's great. I didn't write it. But yeah, I'm also on Twitter at the Lionbrary. That's LYONBRARY. That was my mother's idea, and I loved it. So, who am I kidding?
Good old mom.
Yeah. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. All right, and I'll put those links in the show notes too, just to make it easier. Although it's all easy to type all that stuff in. But people, I care about you listeners, and I will make it slightly easier for you. All right, Brendan, thanks again for joining us. And everyone, until next time. Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared-down but not talked-down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.